So, in the last episode, we spoke about how it was preparing for your wedding day with Ken. You told us a little bit about how you and Ken entered the Satan Slaves.
Kez, I called him.
You called him Kez?
Because of the film.
Ah.
Because he reminded me of that boy. You know, he was a good boy. And we got, yes, the wedding day was a bit demented. There was all kinds of... we had the normal ceremony in the parish church. And then we had a reception in a pub, you know, that did that kind of thing.
Which pub was it?
Oh, I can't remember. It was a country pub, you know, that kind of thing. That did that sort of thing. I mean, every expense was spared, I'll be honest. But then we had a huge party at Otley Civic Hall,
Wow.
of all places. I don't know how we came to find that place, but we certainly did. And for all the bikers, the Satan Slaves and stuff like that. And a couple of kind of weird things happened. Was obviously went to do the first dance, you know, in my wedding gown, and then I just changed into my ordinary biking clothes.
What was the first dance?
Oh God, she's probably Tiger Feet.
I nearly said Tiger Feet.
Well, that was one of our songs, that and Radar Love. It might have been Radar Love. And then my hideous first boyfriend turned up. Now, I had not invited him. Certainly I would not have invited him. And I wasn't best pleased to see him.
Is this the Glastonbury one?
The one that you met at Glastonbury all those years later.
He has a habit of turning up.
He has a habit of turning up, that one.
Unannounced.
Fuck off as well. And he turned up here unannounced once as well. I don't know how he found out, but anyway, he turned up, and I'd left my denim cut off, you know, across the back of a chair, so I was wearing my t-shirt and jeans and stuff. And he wrote rude messages on it in a biro and left. It was just a good thing he did leave, because if I'd caught him, it would have been all hell loose. And then I remember sitting with the president of the Satan Slaves on the stairs of this civic hall. I obviously went upstairs to offices and all this kind of business, which was all roped off, you know, for the hire out of a dance, you know, or whatever. And he was an interesting man, the president at the time, very interesting guy. He was a Londoner who'd come up. There were all kinds of apocryphal stories about how he'd fled, you know, from doing some dirty, dreadful deed, you know, in London, and had to hide out in
Shipley.
Yes. You would think the Bahamas, wouldn't you? But well, Shipley's as good as anywhere.
Good place to hide.
Good place to hide. Bradford's a very good place to hide. If you don't want to be found in Bradford, you won't be found. I've always said this. There's people hiding in Bradford people just would not credit. But anyway. So he was a big guy. He was one of those florid guys with, you know, black hair and black eyes and quite, you know, sort of a florid complexion. And he was talking to me, which was unusual, because the men didn't tend to talk to the women particularly, because A, it was territorial, and B, it just wasn't done. And he said to me, "We'll have him in the slaves." And I was like, "Good." And he said, "We'll have him because we can't have you."
Interesting. How did that make you feel?
I wanted to punch the wall.
Mm.
I can't even tell you. You know, and he knew it, because he was not by any means a stupid man.
Well, no, because...
And he did say, "If you ever tell anyone, I'll deny everything." And I went, you know, well, obviously I won't tell anyone, because he's dead now, so it doesn't matter.
You know, if you took his role into the world of business, he was the person who would recruit you because he knew your potential. And that's what maybe people understand more.
He was a very great manager of men. He was a very great politician.
Diplomat.
He knew how to manage men. He was a good leader. He was what I used to call a good bad man. He was a very clever man, and he knew how to manage that bunch of very volatile individuals and keep them cohesive and on track. He was very good at that. I had a lot of admiration for him. He taught me a lot. And but that was gutting, because this whole thing about you can't do it because you're a girl, it's like, it baffles me. It still baffles me. Anything to do with gender stereotyping or anything like that, you know, little girls like pink, little boys like blue. If you're a little girl that likes blue, then you must be a boy. To me, that's the most utter bullshit I've ever heard in my life. All monkeys can climb, as my dad used to say. And you know, if boys want to have long hair, let them have long hair. If girls want to have short hair, let them. I don't honestly see how it makes any pigging difference to anything.
But there's a philosophical logic in.
But
in
there's a social control in telling girls that they have to behave like this and boys that they have to behave like that.
No, I mean, your approach to that is philosophically logical. Of people can actually be anything and capable of anything.
Be anything they want. They can shag whoever they want. They can dress up however they want. That's entirely their concern. As long as they're not fucking over anybody else over or hurting anyone else, they can do whatever they like. What did they used to say? As long as it's not scaring the horses in the street, I don't give a shit what they do.
Or where we live.
Yeah, but you know, so it was like, oh, for God's sake, you know. But that's how it was. So they had him. He actually rose in the ranks to be treasurer in the end because he was so reliable and honest. He was an honest man. And I've no idea what happened to him. If you ever watch this, Kez, it's okay, mate. He did your best. He did his best. He couldn't do anything with me. I was so damaged and so fucked up and so out of control. As much as he tried with his kind heart, it was like trying to. It was like he'd taken a wounded bird into the house, and instead of it being a wounded blackbird, it was a wounded eagle. It just tore everything to shreds. I tore everything to pieces. I was full of rage and full of destruction, and I just.
But the gang gave you an outlet.
They gave me structure because I knew that, you know, you had a place and you knew it, and it was like a family.
A code.
You know, you might not get on with everybody, and I didn't get on with them all at all by any manner of means. But you were a family. You did stick together, and you were, you know, to a degree, and you knew what was going on, and it was a structure, and had structure. Although things I used to contravene things all the time, and people used to, you know, because it was very violent. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't like this lovely. It wasn't, you know. People watch what is that terrible program, Sons of Anarchy.
Well, there's a lot of violence there, but what you're saying is it's not like the motorcycle gangs that care about having more chrome on the cycles than they do anything else,
like
and stop at every butty shop around the Dales.
If the women got out of line, they got a slap or worse. So that was normal.
Yeah.
You know, and you can moan about how awful that is and how wrong it is till you're blue in the face, but that's how it was back then. That's how it was. And people used to say, I don't know how you get away with not having Mitch taking you to one side and giving you the smack that you so richly deserve. And I'd say, because I was horrible. You know, if we'd had that word, you know, that whatever, I'd have been whatevering around all over the place. Because that's basically what I was. My gran used to call it being bolshy. Or dumb insolence. It was really, I was a very insolent girl.
So how old were you then?
Probably about 20.
And you were married?
I was living in Balden, which is a village just outside of Bradford, just directly on the moorland. I was living in a £6 a week flat. You get a flat for £6 a week. It was the coldest place on God's earth. The walls were solid stone. It was an old stone building above a shop. It was above a shop. It was above a baker's at one point, which was quite nice. I do love baked goods. And
You used to frequent the bakers.
I used to frequent the bakers, yes. And it was, it had thick walls of stone, and it was freezing. There was no central heating or anything like that. And a lot of the time, the boiler was painfully inadequate. So you were lucky if you got 3 inches of tepid water out for a bath. He used to sit in the bath. Oh, God bless him. He used to sit and he used to wash that beautiful, beautiful hair with a bar of fairy soap in the bath, and it came out all gleaming and shining and fantastic. If I did that, my hair would stick together in clumps, but not him. Bastard, I've never forgiven him for that. And with this beautiful hair, and he'd sit in the bath, smoking a cigar. He quite liked a cigar. And would have me quiz him on out of Jane's fighting ships on various battleships. So I'd be sitting by the side of the bath, and he'd be sitting in the bath, washing his hair with fairy soap. And I'd go, HMS Esmeralda. And he'd go, oh, so many tons, so many guns, so many this, that and the other. And I'd go, yep. And he'd go, right, next ton. And he spoke really broad, which I didn't at that time. So he spoke the old way. So he would say, for example, go into the bathroom and run us some warm water for a bath. And my father's coming round later. And what are you lurking at in there? You stop with your bloody calling, and go up to the shop for some spice. Fancy some spice.
Sweets.
Yeah. Laking, playing.
Yeah.
What are you playing at? 2 little boys laking at football. What them lads laking about at? And it was the long A, the warm water, father. And lovely speech actually. I love it. I think it's beautiful, but it's an old speech. You don't hear it so much now. And we wore clogs. This is another thing, the Yorkshire clogs, which people, you'll have to Google Yorkshire clogs if you don't know what they look like. They're a leather boot with a wooden sole, and we had irons on them, which were like horseshoe irons, which were nailed into the sole of the shoe on the motorcycle. So that's what we had, and we used to knock carpet nails around the outside to more metal, and that's what we wore biking. Was these clogs, boots. And,
little did you know at that time that maybe
it would make a connection later on. It
would become an absolute trend.
That would be an absolute thing, but no, they were just practical and cheap. £3.50 a pair. That's what they cost.
And you could resell them.
Oh, endlessly. Yeah. But and the irons you never needed to, because that was actually literally metal. It was iron. And when you put your feet down on the bike, they'd spark off the pavement.
Fantastic. You needed it to get your foot down on.
Yeah, you were. We tried not to do that too often, but so that was that life, and he was getting more and more involved in it, and I was getting madder and madder.
In what way?
I was probably having the first of several nervous breakdowns. I've never been bothered about talking about mental health. And I'm not ashamed of it. I don't get this thing about it's embarrassing or anything like that. I'd talk about breaking my arm or leg, and I'm happy to, in the same way. So I'd suffered from undiagnosed PTSD for years, and depression associated with that. I was never very anxious. I don't tend to suffer from anxiety, so I know it plagues a lot of people, but it never bothered me so much. But depression, yes, terribly, and I say this PTSD, which was quite classic in its manifestation of the nightmares, flashbacks, shakes, inability to fucking function in the world, fugue states, you name it. And of course there was no diagnosis of this, and there was no help available. And what happened in the end was I was getting worse and worse. I had no contact with my parents or family. He did his best for me, but he was working away. He wanted to be a good provider. So he got a job contracting, which meant he'd be away for 6 weeks on end, and I'll be alone in the flat. It wasn't good for me. It's not good for me to be alone. I'm not that person. I'm not one of those people that really relishes being left alone, or just want to be on my own. I like being on my own for a while sometimes. I don't mind. But on the whole, I prefer to be in company.
How did you spend your days?
I'd sleep all day. I'd get up in the evening, I'd eat something maybe. I was never very good with food. You know, if I'm not cooking for somebody else, I won't cook anything. Wouldn't eat properly. I'd have some toast, you know. I'd drink a bottle of cider. I can't drink cider now, even the smell of it makes me vomit. And then people would come round, maybe there'd be people coming round, and they weren't good people. They weren't. The Saint and Slaves didn't come round because that would have been inappropriate, because that was a married the wife of a club member. So they wouldn't really come round, but sometimes they'd come round, you know, to check up on me, I guess. But
Lost.
It wasn't good. I was lost. I was well lost.
So how it feels as you're explaining.
I couldn't write poetry. I did have one gig, I remember, when he took me to it on the motorcycle. Bless him. And there I was declaiming up the front, you know, thinking, you know, doing my bit. And I looked across the audience and I saw him, he'd just come out of work, and he was just going. But he fell asleep. And then I woke him up when we went home, and he went, "Oh, that was really grand, you were grand." Bless him.
Well covered. Well covered.
Bless his little face, you know, he did his best. But I wasn't really doing that. Occasionally I'd do designs for tanks, for motorcycle tanks, but I wasn't really doing a lot, actually. And anyway, so I got really ill, and I knew I was ill. And I went to the local doctor, the GP, who fucking hated me. He thought I was a living disgrace. At one point he'd said to me, I'd gone in for something, I used to get bronchitis a lot, and of course the cold damp flat didn't help, you know, so I would get bronchitis all the time. So I'd gone into the GP and he said, "Do you intend having children?" And I said, "Well, yes, at some point, obviously." And he went, "If you get pregnant, I will recommend you to be aborted, as I don't consider you to be a suitable person to be a mother of a child. So just bear that in mind."
Wow.
So I did bear it in mind. So I'd gone to him and said, "Look, there's something wrong with me. I'm wrong. I need help, you know." So his answer to that was to have me sectioned.
Which led to?
Because he said to me, I remember him saying to me, "Do you ever feel violent?" And I said, "Yes, oh yes I do. But I knew I wouldn't hurt somebody else, but I felt violent towards myself, you know, or the world. I wasn't intending to, like," but he turned it around and made it look like I was going to hurt someone, which I'd never have done. So he said I was to be admitted to one of the local hospitals. Now, they said, "Well, just turn up at this time." So Kez went with me on his bike, and I went on my bike, because that was our form of transport. We weren't being clever. That was just how we got around. And it was out towards Appley Bridge. You know, when New Line, we turned down there was a hospital out there somewhere. I can't remember what it was now, but it was, yeah, it was almost in the countryside, as I vaguely remember. But anyway, we rode up there, and
correctional facility.
No, it was a mental hospital. And you've been reading One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest too much.
I think I have, yeah.
Yeah. Just dial it back, baby. So, yeah. So we went there and we parked out the back because we couldn't find the front car park, which meant we had to walk. We ended up walking through the hospital to get to the place that we'd been told to go to. And the night before, we'd been just desultorily watching television, and I'd been sort of terrified, speechless of what was going to come, because I knew what was coming. He didn't. And there was a film on. It was an old 60s film about a girl who ends up in a mental hospital through really no fault of her own, and is given ECT and things like that. And he looked at me at one point and said, "Is it like this?" And I went, "Oh yeah, it's like that." And he didn't say anything. Anyway, so we went to this place and we walked through the hospital, and he was looking at everything. all the time. And
Were
I
your
wasn't.
parents there?
No, what the hell was like. I phoned my mother and said to her, this is happening, and she said, well, they gave your grandfather ECT, it'll probably do you good. Anyway, so we walked through this place, and as I say, he was very observing of everything. I wasn't, because I was too desperate and terrified. And the doctors were there, and I remember that it was in this sort of office, and he was saying, you know, he said to them, what about a motorbike? It's parked out the back. And they said, oh, she won't be in a condition to ride a motorcycle. Can you get someone to come and fetch it with you? And he went, well, probably, yeah. He said, but you said she could come home at the weekends. And they said, yeah, but she won't be in any condition to ride a motorcycle. And they were talking to him. They wouldn't talk to me. They just talked across me because I was mad.
Or considered that way?
No, I probably was mad at that point. I don't care. You know, it was a fact. You know, I was ill. And but they wouldn't talk to me because I didn't count. I was just... And he said to them, can I have a word with her in private before I leave? And they went, oh yes, of course you can. You know, just use that room over there. And he took me into this little room, and we stood in the doorway. And he said, I know you've never ever fucking done anything I ever fucking told you. He said, but you'll do this this time. He said, when I say run, run. And I looked at him and he said, run. And we ran through the hospital. He dragged me by my hand, running through the hospital. Nurses flying, trolleys flying, patients gibbering, the whole bloody lot. We ran right through. We jumped on the bikes. My bike started first time. It had never done that in living history. And we rode off, and he kept me in the flat. He looked after me, and they came after him and said, and he wouldn't let them open the door. They had to push a piece of paper through the cat flap for him to sign to say I wouldn't kill anyone. And he signed it. He saved my life. So whatever happens in the world, I hope he's watching this, that he will know how grateful I am to him for what he did for me.
Because you knew what, now looking back, what would have followed.
They would have given me ECT.
Mm.
They would have destroyed my brain. They would have done that in the name of their science.
What was actually, back then, a fairly clandestine way of dealing with mental health issues, because they didn't know what people know now, which they're still figuring out.
Women like me.
Which was?
We weren't just bad, we were mad. Because we contravened what society said women were supposed to be like so strongly. So we would have to be mad. How else could it be described? What we were doing. And this is what, led me to eventually to punk, because I wanted to destroy all those stereotypes for women. No girl would ever be put in that position again if I had had my way. No girl would ever be told by some doctor that he would have her child aborted because she wouldn't be a good mother because she was a biker or a punk or a goth or had tattoos or anything like that.
Or actually more, I wouldn't say normal, because the creative brain don't work that way, but by today's standards, actually, what happened then to you, people would kind of think of it in a different way, and you would be, well, quite frankly, either offered therapy or be very, very heavily medicated.
Oh, they would have medicated me to the point of non-existence. They'd already tried that. I'd already had every kind of medication going, and none of it made any difference.
And
because nobody ever addressed the fact that what my behaviour or what my reactions were perfectly normal reactions to severe trauma and repeated trauma.
Yeah.
But then nobody would admit the level of sexual assault or sexual violence.
Physical violence.
Physical violence. The things I saw in the Satan slaves would give most people nightmares for the rest of their life. Never mind everything that had happened to me prior. So this was a perfectly normal response to extreme trauma. But because they couldn't admit that things like that happened, nor did they be bothered even to ask me. There you go.